Hello,
Hey,
everyone.
hey.
We're just going to wait for people to wander in. So it'd be very nice if you'd like to introduce yourselves in the chat whilst we're waiting for everyone to arrive and say hello to each other. But we'll just wait 2 or 3 minutes for everyone to get in before we begin. So for those that have just arrived, we're just waiting for everyone to come along. We'll wait a minute more or something like that. If you want to introduce yourselves in the chat, that'll be lovely. Then we can see who's here. You've got time to put a couple of sentences about what you do as well as where you're from if you want to do that. And we'll start in a minute or two. Gonna wait 1 more minute. It's only 1 minute past 1. People might be a bit later than that. There's people still joining. The people who are just joining, we're just introducing ourselves in the chat whilst we wait for everyone to arrive. And you can say who you are and where you're from, and if you want to, you can put a couple of sentences about what you do as well. Some interesting people here. I'm just scanning the chat myself. It's really nice to see who's here. Yeah, someone's just said they've got their camera off. That's totally cool. If you want your camera off, we don't mind at all. It's fine. Oh, there's some interesting people here. I'm really enjoying these intros. Hi, Jane. All right, I'm going to start. So I'll start with introduction. I'm only going to speak for probably less than 5 minutes, and then I'll hand over to Brett, who's going to do the most part of the webinar. So I'm Jade. I work for the Real Farming Trust. We're doing this little project because we're interested in food sovereignty. That is to say, people having a voice about their food and how it's produced and how they'd like their food system or their food arrangements to be. And what we've noticed in the course of our work is that some people have much louder voices than others, and some voices are unheard. If you're from an organisation that's got nothing to do with food, that's completely fine. Anyone can come to this webinar. We'll record it, and it's fine to share it. So if you want to make videos for your own purposes that have nothing to do with food, you're very welcome. It's completely fine. So as well as doing this video, I'm going to collect 10 videos of people just talking about their food situation for 1 minute only. And those ones, the ones we make use of, will get professionally edited by Brett, and we'll share them in order that there are better representative voices about people's food systems and food choices in the food organisations that we work for. I might get sent a lot more than 10 or a lot less. I don't know. I've just noticed someone who supports 350 organisations. So the ones we use, I'll pay 50 quid for the person who sent them in. But I think because I've got no idea how many I'm going to get and I haven't got an unlimited budget, then I better not promise anyone that they'll get 50 quid. But if you can send in 1 minute videos of ordinary people talking about their food situation, what they like, what they don't like, what they'd like to be different, what they wish for to me, and I'll put my email address in there. Then I'll pick out 10 that are probably most broad and most useful for Brett to edit. You can get them back to use for yourself. But in any case, you might want to make your own videos. I should say that this little piece of work is funded by the National Lottery Community Fund, and it's a spin-off of a bigger programme of work we do about food justice and social justice and agroecology. I think that's all I need to say. So I'm going to pass over to Brett now, who's a real expert, and he's going to talk to us about how to make really great videos on our phones. Thanks, Brett.
Hello all, glad to be joining you here today. I'm going to ask Amelia first of all to share my screen and just give you a quick bit of background of how I think I should run this quick session. I'll be talking through this first document, and I think if I do that without interruption first of all, we can then take a little pause, have some questions at the end of that, and then I'll go through another document that's pretty similar. It just has a bit more detail and a few more tips and ideas for you to think about. So first of all, just reiterating what Jade was saying, which is that we're after, for this project, 1-minute videos. So if you can bear that in mind when you come to making your video, please don't give me 2 hours of content, to cut that down to 1 minute. But I'll lead you through that process a little more as we go. So just, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I've enabled you to share your screen, so you'll just need to click down and do share screen when you're ready.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, can you all see this document? Please let me know by thumbs up. Fantastic. That's great. Thank you. Okay, so as mentioned, please don't feel like you've got to read through this. This just happens to be the content I'm referring to now. And you can look at this and another document later if you want to. So the first thing I'm going to mention, in this particular film, we want you to make your video in landscape, not portrait orientation. So that way, not that way. And the reason for that being that when we use these at the Oxford Real Farming Conference, we've got a widescreen projection screen. And if we need to make these repurposed for social videos, which are more portrait style, I can crop into it and make that work. But essentially, if you can give me your footage as landscape rather than portrait, and just consider giving yourself, if you're featuring your video or you have someone that you're recording in your video, keep them fairly prominent in the screen. So I've suggested a sort of head and shoulder type shot like that. And again, just reiterating, the landscape, not portrait, is what we want. So I'll get sort of the techie stuff over and done with, and then we'll get into perhaps the more creative things. So the next thing I'm considering here is just how you hold your camera being your phone. Probably for most people, you may have an iPad or something similar. But I would say, unless you want to move around because you're showing things in the background, 2 hands, one here, holding it steady, the other one here, so it's not obscuring the lens, is a good way to go. Because they're light and they're small, you can get away with not having a support like a tripod. However, if you do have a tripod or you have a pile of books or something you want to lean your camera on, that's a pretty good idea, because you can then concentrate on what's being said rather than the seasickness that you might get seeing these things, particularly on a big screen. That will be accentuated. The next thing to consider is your location, your background. What I'm thinking of here, first of all, is just making sure it's relevant. The background is either not distracting, in which case it's just a plain background so you can see the person that you're interviewing or you as the speaker. But if you do want to put any props, or you're actually shooting on location that has some relevance to the story you're telling, just make sure you haven't got people that are going to distract. Like, for instance, if you're at an allotment and there's someone in the background who's decided to wave at you because they want to be on camera, it just gets a bit irritating and will take away from your message. So please just have a quick look through your camera, make sure you're getting what you want. And if it's too busy or too distracting, think about a place that's going to work better for you. And with that in mind, lighting is the next thing I'm going to consider. And for this, most cameras on phones work pretty well with the lighting that they can cope with. But don't sit right in front of a window and face the camera into the window, because you'll become a silhouette. Again, you know, check where the sun's coming from. If you're in a dark room, whatever location you might find yourself in, if you've got a domestic lamp or something to stick on your face, do that, and just make it easy for people to see you. Again, check your camera before you start recording. And you know, the beauty of these things is you can do that by flipping the picture on Androids and on iPhones. So I think that's pretty conventional now. So very useful to do. Find a place that works for you, that either shows a background you're interested in or something neutral and isn't going to distract. In terms of the eye line, which is the viewpoint that you're looking at, conventionally, something that's just slightly below your eyes is the most flattering. If you're, you know, right up there or right down there, it's just a bit annoying. You just want to be able to recognize the person, get a sense of their personality, and see who they are without accentuating features they don't want to be seen. And again, with these videos, if you're talking direct to camera, look direct to the lens. If you want it to look like an interview, off camera works well. It depends on the kind of viewpoint you want people to have. If you're addressing an audience, it probably makes sense to look straight to the camera. And if you're interviewing someone, you can have that interaction with the person by looking at them. So I hope that all makes sense. In terms of the framing, this is what I mentioned earlier. A head and shoulders, not unlike the picture you can see there, works pretty well. You get enough of the sense of the person. It gives me the option, if I have to do any editing, of being able to cut into someone and make it look coherent. So now moving on to sound, which clearly for these videos is going to be absolutely important. If we can't hear what you're saying, or it's really annoying because there's traffic in the background, or you're inside and the washing machine's going, it's only going to be amplified on the big speakers in an auditorium. So I know we're talking essentially about video, but this is an integral element of that. So please just be aware of the kind of noise that you've got in your background. And if it sounds distracting when you play it back, it is distracting, and find somewhere else to do it, or wait for that sound to stop. I'm assuming most people won't have an external microphone. However, if you have, that plugs into your phone, you probably have gone a step further forward than most people, and in which case, please just check that also it's working in the way that you want it to. And if it isn't, for whatever reason, take a pause, find a quiet spot, wait till the area is clear, and then record, because I won't be able to do that much with the footage if it's really noisy. I can filter to a degree, but you know, if it's there when you record it, you're going to hear it later. Now talking about the recording itself, most phones will give you the option to set the resolution. And depending on how new the phone is, you may have 4K capability or just HD. And all your phones in the settings, I'm talking about an iPhone now because that's what I've got. If you go into the phone settings, there's a camera settings, and then you can choose the highest resolution. So if you have 4K, yeah, why not? By all means, please record in 4K. If it's 1920 by 1080, which is standard HD, that's also fine. And if all of this seems way too confusing, if there's an auto setting, hit that. But for those of you that can work through that, the better the resolution, the more I've got to play with later when I come to editing. Just bear in mind, if you are shooting in high resolution, you'll need space on your phone to keep the recordings because it will eat up more memory. And with that in mind, if you are finding that you're struggling to store it on your phone, you know, download maybe the sections that you need to send to us bit by bit if it's really becoming an issue. I suspect it won't be, but if that inhibits your recording, just check that you've got storage space to manage what you're doing. So we're kind of set up now, ready to record. I'm I'm just going to reverse point 9 and 10 around, because I think that makes more sense, which is rehearsal. You know what you want to say, you know the messages you want to communicate. So give yourself time to think how best you can do that. And the more time you give to that, the more time you give to rehearsing or thinking through the stages that you need to go through to tell your story, the better it will be. It's like anything. You don't want to lose the spontaneity and maybe the dynamic of a situation, but if you've forgotten to say something, or things are spoken out of order and a bit complicated to understand in the recording, they're going to be for me when I put it together in the edit. So please do take time to rehearse and just think about what it is that you want to say, and the clearest way you can communicate that. So if I go back to point 9 now, do a little test recording. You know, is everything working the way you want it to be? Can you hear and can you see the things you want to see? And with that in mind, if you can't, think about how you can change the situation to make it better. Again, it will take a little time to get this absolutely right, but all this preparation pays off in the end. So now going to the recording, something I haven't mentioned here, whilst you record on your phone, put it in silent mode or airplane mode or any of the modes that it's not going to ring or peep when you're doing your brilliant take, because you'll have to do it again. It'll be really frustrating, especially if you're sort of in the moment and really feeling like you're on a run. So yeah, please do remember just to put your phone in silent mode when you're recording. I would also say, before you start straight into your interview or your piece to camera, just give yourself a pause, a little breath, not only to compose yourself, but also so there's time for me to get in with the edit and I don't miss the first word or find you looking off the camera just at the point where you've started to talk. So if you can just take a little pause, relaxing pause, a few breaths, and then press record. And then again, just get yourself nice and settled, find your eye line, whether it be to the camera or off the camera, and then start to give your performance. When you get to the end of your recording, just bear in mind the same thing, please. Just give yourself a little pause before you hit stop, because if you look away immediately for the last moment, it can look a bit distracting and a bit shifty, and again, just takes away from the message you're trying to communicate. So again, when you get to the end, little pause, still looking at the camera or the eye line you've originally had, then hit stop, and that will help me enormously. In terms of telling your story, you may want to give me some cutaway material, some additional shots, and these will be sort of illustrations of the work you're doing or the project that you're involved with. And if you've got things that are sort of fairly static, that aren't absolutely important, that you see a complete amount of time that explains what you're saying, if you could give me at least sort of 10 seconds of each thing, then it will give me time to know that, right, that's the bit I want, and it's not the jiggly bit at the beginning and the end. And if you're going to give me some cutaways, can you please either shoot them in sequence so I know exactly how they go together, or talk over them to tell me where they go? And if that's not possible because you need the sound of what's happening, give me a cue card or something, literally write on a piece of paper, a card, stick that in front of the camera, so I know that the shot of the cornflowers goes with the interview where someone's talking about cornflowers. You get the drift. Just make it easy for me to follow, please, because I won't necessarily know where they go if they're out of order. And if, for instance, you need a shot in a particular place or something to end with, please just spell it out to me. Assume that I don't know anything about your story until I see what you give me. So the clearer you can make it to me, the easier it will be for me to make sure I don't misrepresent you and get everything in the right order. Again, going back to that sort of preparation thing, once you finish your recording, can you please review it? And if you need to re-record something because you're not happy with it and you think you can improve, please do so. but make sure you erase any of the previous versions that you recorded so that I only get the critical bits that are going to work for you. I'm sort of anticipating I'm not going to get thousands of individual clips from you to make this 1 minute. And if you can sort of bear that in mind, just to make my job a little bit easier, I'm not sort of copying out on this totally, but there could be quite a lot of these sections to film and to edit. And again, anything that you can do to spell it out to me will be really helpful. I may not be able to get back to you to say, hey, you know, the bit where the person's waving those secateurs at me, does that mean? You know, so please just absolutely spell it out and make it clear for me. Finally, when you've got your pieces all recorded, I've said here you can deliver them directly to me, but I think Jade has intersected that, and I'll ask her in a second by saying send them to her first. I'll confer with Jade in just a second to see which is the preferred option there.
Yeah, that's right, send them to me. So I'll put my email again in the chat, and when we send the document around, we'll have it with my email. Otherwise, you might get rid of the email. So.
Okay, there you go. And I don't know if you're familiar with services like WeTransfer for sending video files. I mean, you may be able to email them direct from your phone. If they're quite big files, I would suggest using a transfer service, a file transfer service. WeTransfer is free. You have to sign up for it. If it's under 2 gigabytes, which I'm sure your files will be, it's a free service, but you do have to go to the website, wetransfer.com, sign up for it, and you can send your files individually from there on in. So hopefully that's given you a good sort of base overview. I'm going to pause for a moment to see if we've got any questions at this point, and then I'm going to share another document and go through things in a little more detail. So I'm going to close this one down. So my screen.
I'll just come in before we carry on to say, don't send us any clips where we can identify children for safeguarding reasons. The backs of the heads are all right. And if you've got any other adults, make sure you've got their consent.
On that, just following up on that, the other thing to bear in mind is if you feel the need to sort of, you know, have a bit of music playing or something, that can be a real problem because of copyright. And if anything ever ends up on YouTube, YouTube just blocks things if it doesn't know that you've got the permission to use that music. So yeah, just reiterating what Jade just said, no children, all adults have agreed, and no music, please. Unless it's your own music, if you happen to write music.
So we had a few questions in the chat, and just to encourage anyone who has questions, if you want to raise your hand, or you can just unmute yourself to ask Brett a question. But if there's no one who wants to do that, I can read out the questions that have already been asked. So Hannah Davies asked, we are planning to capture a video at an upcoming event that's taking place in a market. Will that work with what you have planned in terms of the sound? I'm guessing meaning background sound.
Good question, and very difficult to tell without being there. In terms of the video that you're capturing, please bear in mind we're after a minute. So if it's an event, you will presumably have a lot of footage. So if you want to give me a flavour of the event, say, I don't know, 6 or 8 shots of what the event represents, perhaps the sounds, you know, you can make that work, or maybe the atmosphere is more important. In terms of what you want to say with that, was that Hannah? Hannah Davis? Yeah, Hannah. In terms of what you want that story to say, perhaps just have a think about it. If you can't hear clearly what's happening at the event, maybe you or someone needs to step aside and explain what we're seeing, and I can use that as a voiceover perhaps under the images. Does that make sense to you? Does that answer you?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we had another question from Jane Campbell, who was asking for your recommendations on cheap or affordable but good wireless mics for iPhones?
Good question. Rode make a good one. I will need to find out the number of that, the serial number or whatever it is. But I think the Rode ones are really good. They sort of have a built-in microphone with a receiver, and they seem to work pretty well. But I can't tell you what it's called off the top of my head, I'm afraid. I'll look into that for you. But Rode, R-O-D-E is the make.
Oh yeah, so that's R-O-D-E.
Yeah.
Jane had another question and was asking for your top tips for creating a simple and engaging top and tail for a video. The best practice for that.
Top and tail, in terms of graphic type elements, is that what you're after, Jane? Yes. Okay. Do you have any experience with any editing software or anything like that? Maybe I'm
now, shouldn't I? Hi.
quicker than typing.
Sorry, I wasn't expecting to be dragged into a conversation,
Yeah,
but yeah. So mainly Canva, to be honest,
Okay.
but also CapCuts on the cards as well. I just don't want to. It's something to roll out across the staff team, so I don't want anything too complicated. And it's not so much about the app, more about kind of like what's the kind of best practice in terms of creating something that might work as a series, but isn't it doesn't get in the way of the video content itself.
If I've understood you correctly, so you would want something that sets up what you're about, and maybe something that ends the piece with a sort of conclusion and credits, that kind of thing. Is that sort of where we're going with this?
Yes, broadly.
In which case, with something like Canva, for this film, you could create, or even in a Word document, a built-up section. So you could give me frame 1 to say 6, and in the stages, and I can cut those together. So I can, in effect, pseudo animate it. So if you wanted to say, we're here to talk about blah, 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 you could give me those frames as any kind of PDF, JPEG, or PNG type documents, and I can cut them together for you. Does that answer your question? Did that work for you? Have I kind of...
Yeah, it's okay. That didn't quite, but I'm taking up too much time and other people have got questions, so I can always come back to Jade afterwards.
Okay.
Thank you.
There was a question earlier on from Stephanie Kennedy, asking around understanding that landscape videos are good for YouTube and for X, but Stephanie's wondering if Reels on Instagram and TikTok mean that online content is more needing a portrait format.
Well, I mean, this is a sort of hot potato, really, but I'm talking specifically about what we want for usage at the Oxford Real Farming Conference. And if you have it in landscape mode, I can take the middle section and create a Insta or TikTok type video, which is that. If you start like that, you've got an awful lot of space around the outside. So, typically you see on TV now, they sort of duplicate or triplicate the image to fill the frame. And I would, if you have to blow it up or duplicate it, and therefore you miss an awful lot of real estate of your screen that could be showing interesting stuff. I think if you're concerned about Instagram and TikTok, you've just got to decide what you're doing it primarily for. And if it is for that rather than that, you've got to keep people in the center of frame and then not worry too much about the sides. But it's a really awkward scenario now, because I think we've all seen us on TV when we use portrait film stuff. What do you do with the sides? You're missing an awful lot of picture information, and generally it just happens to be people duplicated to fill in that frame or put in a colored background. But for this purpose, please give me that. I've got more flexibility.
Great. And then there's a question from Ginny, who is asking for your tips for small land-based organizations. Ginny has a tree growing and planting organization, and they're just starting to make short form video content for Instagram. And they'd like some tips from you.
Okay, I think probably the following bit of the chat will help you with that. And I've also put a couple of links to other people's YouTube videos that I thought were pretty decent in terms of tips for trying to get the most engaging pictures. I don't know if you're looking for stylistic tips or content tips, but maybe we could come back to you, Ginny, if we get through the next sort of half of this discussion, and if that hasn't answered anything, if you could flag it up, and I'll see if I can help you then.
I'm wondering whether these would be better for the next session. There's a question from Stephanie about good editing tools on iPhone for video.
Yeah, yes, there are. Maybe you should do that. Should we move on to the second half? And then
Save
we
the
can
questions.
happily come back to all of these, if that's all right with everyone. So I'm going to pull up another document, which is kind of version 2 of what we've discussed. Is that still sharing, Amelia?
Not right now.
Okay,
You should be able to
one
share.
second. Yeah, and here we go. So that should be visible to you now. I might just expand that a little bit. Is that a good size for you to see?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, excellent. Okay, well, I'll go back to talking at you, and hopefully we can share some of the messages from this at the end of this run through. As I mentioned, it's essentially the same, but just a little bit more preparation and a few tips in there. So in terms of preparation and planning, if you can think about what it is that you want to say about what is your story, what are the key messages, and who needs to tell those, impart that wisdom and tell us that story. And also, what are the key images that you can have to make that message stand out?
Brett, Brett, would you mind just zooming in on your doc a bit? Making it a bit bigger on your screen.
Yeah, coming up.
Thank you.
How's that?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So there you go. So I've just sort of jotted down a few things that in a rough format, what you can do to probably help just hit those key points. So who's going to be speaking? What are their key messages? Where are you going to film them? And how long are they going to talk for? You can add as many cells as you like to this kind of document. You can create it in sort of script format, whatever you want. But I think it's really useful just to have at least these 4 elements worked out before you start filming. It'll just keep you focused on duration, which in our case is a minute, which you'll notice that actually is 1 minute 10. So that was not very well thought through, but there you go. But yeah, for instance, I've just put in here someone explaining what the organization, how it was set up, and where are you going to see them well in front of what they're producing, and they're going to talk for about 30 seconds. So I think if you can get anything like this on any kind of document, it just helps clarify your beginning, your middle, and end. And if there's anything missing, it's sort of evident on a piece of paper before you start filming. And of course, things will involve, and talking to somebody who's going to be looking at an event, it won't be quite as easy to structure like this, but you will at least know what the event's highlights are. So just, please bear in mind, when you get to the end of that minute, have you told the story you want to tell? And if not, what can you add to it to make that message clearer? So back to location. And in this case, what do you want to hear as well as showing you pictures? And does your location help illustrate the point that you want to make? If you can't find a relevant location, maybe just a plain neutral one is the way to go. And at least then you can control the ambient noise and anything that can distract. I've just put here a picture of someone that could well be in an allotment, or could be in a community farm or whatever. And if that's what they're talking about, well, it makes sense to have quite a wide shot that you can see all of that. If it is someone talking about something more conceptual you can't really visualize, please don't put them in a location that tries to tell a different story. You know, if you can find something relevant, let's see it. And if not, keep it neutral. Again, it's only a minute that we've got to play with, so help the audience understand your message. And again, consider the noise and the light. Can you see what you want to see? And any kind of, if you're indoors, any kind of domestic lighting works. You know, you don't need special camera lights or anything like that. A window, a white reflector bouncing off things, or just a desktop lamp, everything will help you. I've just realized that on the first run through, we didn't talk about this, whether you were using the front camera or the back camera. And that will depend on whether you're filming yourself, presumably. If you've got the choice, please always use the back camera, because it is slightly better quality than the front camera flipped around. All the phones are built to use those lenses on them. And this one that you can't even see on here is not quite as good. If you've got no choice, you've got no choice. But if you have the choice, please use the lenses that are dedicated on that camera. And don't forget, give them a little wipe before you start recording. It's very easy to put your fingers all over the lenses. And you can't always tell what that is at first. So just find some kind of cloth that's sort of not going to leave fluff on it and give it a wipe. And charge your battery. You don't want to get halfway through and it runs out. That'd be very, very frustrating. So we've gone through this element again of stabilizing or hand holding your camera. And again, your choice, you know, if you want to move because you want to see images around you, great. If not, keep it nice and steady. And this works best, I find. If you've got two hands on the camera, you can keep it pretty steady, or just rest it up against a pile of books, or stick it to a wall, or whatever you can. But yeah, steady is good when you're doing interviews, and movement is good when you're illustrating stuff. If you go to your camera settings, if you can please set to the best quality or an auto setting. If you're familiar with cameras and you've got camera apps, perhaps they're a little bit more advanced, you'll know what you want to do with that in terms of aperture and shutter speed and those kind of things. But for most people, just find the best quality and set it to that, please. This, again, the eye line, number 8 here, we've discussed this. This is when you're doing interviews and finding out what works best for you. You know, do you want to see that much of a person, that much of a person? If it's really intense and the message is really, really emotional or captivating, maybe you want to go in a bit tighter. Somewhere here would work quite well, and then you'll really get facial expressions and the emotion of your speakers. If you want to see something a bit more expansive because the background works for you, then you know, combine them as you feel appropriate. Whatever works for you, please just think about what helps tell that message. Also, manual modes, that's all part of that sort of best setting things. Again, depending on your experience, you know, you can go down quite a rabbit hole if you're not sort of photography literate in terms of manual modes, but they may well help you in extreme light conditions. You may well decide that you want to set an aperture because you're going from a light scene to a dark scene. But if you don't want to get involved with that, just stick to auto, and most phones do a really good job of compensating stuff for you. We talked about sound before. External mic, if you've got one, fantastic. And I am going to find out the name of that Rode microphone I mentioned. But otherwise, just listening out for anything that can be distracting, like wind rustle, you know, traffic, other people talking, cars going through the shop, aeroplanes overhead, whatever. If it interrupts the bit that you're recording, and when you play it back, you think, actually, I didn't quite catch that word, please just record it again. You know, make it easy for your audience. It's really testing of the patience if you're struggling to hear what people are saying. So please just consider the environment you're in, and if it's too noisy, but it's telling a story, go somewhere quiet to record the thing, and then give me a cutaway or a separate shot of what it is that you want to show. And then I can edit the two things together rather than trying to sift through some kind of noise cancelling software that's never really going to take out the horrible rumble that's really distracting. I think I mentioned this on the first run through, that this is just really making sure you've got space on your phone for the footage that you're going to record. You may have to clear the storage on your phone or download sections of the video bit by bit. In an iPhone, that's in the general settings under storage. In a Android, it'll be similar. But yeah, if your phone stops recording and you don't know why, this could be the why. So just bear that in mind if you have any issues when you're recording. And going back to that recording, we were talking about the framing and the eye line. So to try and demonstrate that, I'm looking at the camera now, I'm looking off camera now. Which works best? If you're talking to an audience, if I'm talking to you, it makes sense for me to be looking at you. If I'm talking to someone interviewing me, it makes sense for me to be talking to them. But please, whatever works for you, just sort of bear those conventions in mind. Again, looking out for distractions or anything that can take away the audience's concentration from what it is you're trying to communicate. Put your phone in do not disturb mode or airplane mode or any of those sort of things, and then you won't get ringing sounds or alerts or anything in the middle of your recording. Easy to forget that, can be really annoying just at the point where you've got to the critical bit and the phone rings. That's going to really annoy you. Reiterating the landscape mode for this particular instance, please. And then making a test recording. So before you get into the meat of what it is that you're trying to do, just record 30 seconds, you replay that and see what it is that is working and what might not be working, and adjust accordingly. Delete that file, I don't need to see it. And then, you know, enjoy yourself when you get to the filming of the bits that you do want to send to me. But please only keep the takes that work. And if you need to give me written notes just to talk through the order of how things should be edited, do so. You know, anything that makes it clearer for me to cut the footage together to tell the story you want is a good thing. You're happy to email me. I've put my email address down there at the bottom. But if you can't add visual notes, maybe talk through some of the cutaway material or give me a document so I can follow it. Here, I didn't know the duration until just now, so I'm going to put in 1 minute because that's what we're after for these films, please. So that's the final bit of final film sort of length we're aiming for ideally. I'm sure we've got a little bit of leeway with a few seconds either way, but if you can aim for that, that would be fantastic. So please just do a little calculation of the takes that you're giving me, and that they don't add up to 4 or 5 minutes, they add up to a minute. Here's my email address. Do get in contact if you feel that maybe you've given me something that I won't explain, it won't be able to follow. More than happy to correspond with you. And then finally, I've just put these links here because we'll share this document. And these are a bit more aesthetic tips for how to make your camera work for you. So looking at things like, you know, the camera angle, the way that you can move the camera to add a bit of drama and a bit of emphasis to your shots. I don't really think we've got time to go into too much of that today, but I found these pretty useful and they're just available on YouTube. So hopefully some good reference material there. So I've gone through again, I've said a lot. I'm going to stop now and we'll go back to questions, and hopefully you'll have plenty to ask and I can answer them for you. So Amelia, I'm now looking at these questions, but if you could help me go through them, that would be wonderful. Oh yes, so just heading back to Stephanie, tools for editing on your iPhone for video. You can use iMovie in the phone, and that's really pretty sophisticated. Your iPhone will come with iMovie ready loaded. If not, perhaps a sort of more professional system you could use is Premiere Pro, Adobe, but you have to pay for these things. I would say iMovie is going to do a great job. It's really pretty decent, and it's free if you've got an iPhone. There are thousands of other software tools out there, but I wouldn't go straight into something like Avid in the first instance, because it'll take way too long to get going. That sort of tends to be used more on TV and films. But iMovie, fantastic, does a good job, and it's free. I'm looking at Maddie now.
Screen share's a bit weird. I don't know if you can try stopping sharing again. It hasn't quite disappeared. That's
There
better.
you go.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. Now I'm looking at Maddie here. What's a good length of shot per person? Not too brief, not too drawn out, within the confines. Well, there you go. Within that minute, maybe 4 people is probably max before you're ending up seeing way too many people and not hearing enough from them. So if you think of a minute, that's a long TV ad. If it's a very fast-paced thing, yes, 4 or 5 people are going to work fine. If it's something that's a little bit more thoughtful and considered, maybe 2 or 3 is better. You know, the only thing I can say to you in that, and I'm passing the buck totally, is try it. You know, talk for 20 seconds amongst 3 of your friends, which equals a minute, and see if that's going to tell you what you want to hear. If it makes sense to just have 2 people talking for 30 seconds, there you go. But certainly within a minute, I would say you could get at least 4 people on the screen. So hopefully that gives you the good sort of balance between the people you want to represent and saying something of import, but not being sort of tokenized by just appearing for 5 seconds and not really saying anything. Vanessa, would the best say what you're saying there, if you wanted to do slow-mo, we're talking about frames per second on your camera. If you gave it to me at 60 frames a second, I can slow-mo that down to half speed, but it won't necessarily look any better. It's sometimes the motion is a little bit sort of almost too smooth. So I would go at 1080 at 30 frames a second. If you've got PAL settings, it might come up as 25 frames a second as well. So go for the 30 or the 25. 60 would only be useful, or anything higher than that, if you wanted me to make it into slow motion, and in which case you'd need to tell me that. But that's a shot to be slow mode. Hopefully that answers your question, and if it doesn't, please shout. We have you right. I think I've covered all those questions there, but please shout if I haven't. Does that look like I've answered all your questions? And if not, please just put one back in the chat.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions in the chat. Oh, there's one from Jane.
Well, 4K, Jane. Yeah, it is just a storage space issue. 4K, better resolution. It just gives me more to play with. So if you have that option, please go for 4K. That's great. Again, just in case any more questions are coming in and filling in the time, whatever you can do, be it a written document or notes on your bits of video you're sending me, please, please, please spell it out like I've got no idea what's happening, so I edit them in the way that you're expecting. And if there's anything that you want me to do with the footage in particular, please just ask and I'll see what I can do. Otherwise, what I'll do as a sort of standard is cut them in the order you want them to, try and tidy them up in terms of anything like a white balance or noise, but otherwise it'll be, I'll do it as you tell me. Maddie, am I doing any similar trainings on video editing? I'm not, but YouTube is your friend. You will find something. I can tell you without a doubt there'll be something on there that will help. It may take you a little bit of time to sort of sift through the good from the bad, but I'm sure you'll find plenty of stuff. Transcriptions, yes, there are loads. Off the top of my head, the one that I use is part of my editing software, but I could look into that for you in terms of one that would work with just an audio file.
I use one called Otter, which works well and it's free.
Was that Otto? Yeah. Trint is what I use, but I think that may be free. It comes part of the editing package, but Trint or Otto, Jade is recommending Otto. That Rode mic, I've got to look into that for you. I'm going to have to get back to you on that one. It's the one that the iPhone 6 has a headphone jack input, I believe. So it should be very straightforward to work on that. Otherwise, you've got to get the little adapter plug that goes from whatever that is, the USB-C to headphone socket. But I think with an old iPhone, you can plug it straight in. I will look into the number of that Rode mic because it escapes me at the moment.
I've just seen your question, Jane. I don't have permissions to share your emails as you've put onto Zoom. So if you want to share each other's contact details now in the chat in order you can keep in touch with each other as your projects come along, then do that if you don't mind sharing them, because I don't have GDPR permissions to share your emails. If we've run out, I mean, if you've got questions, we'll prioritise those. But if you haven't, it might be interesting for some people to tell us about the videos they want to make and why they want to make them. I know some people are on the call because they want to submit ones for the Real Farming Trust to use, and a lot of people are on the call because they want to make videos for their own projects or other purposes. So if we run out of questions, we'll stop at 2, but you might like to tell us what videos you want to make for your own projects. Jane, I don't know the answer to that question, but I'll ask. I'll tell you what I'll do, Jane, when I send out the mailing, if there's anything useful to share about the Agroecology Comms Network and how to join that and whether you can join it, I'll include that in the mailing. And then you can hear about other people who are trying to communicate about agroecology and this kind of work, and there's a learning network there. Yeah, pipe up in the last 7 minutes when anyone wants to unmute and tell us about the videos they want to make, then that'll be interesting to hear.
Alternatively, if you want me to recap on anything, please do shout. Otherwise, I hope the document that we share gives you enough reference back to what we're trying to achieve today.
Jane wanted to say something.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure I'm going to have the capacity to produce it for this in time for this particular project, but I'm just kicking off a new kind of insider insights into our organisation. So I work for Foodworks Sheffield, and I'm trying to kind of create a really, I'm head of engagement. I'm trying to create a really comms-led environment where all of our staff out in the field capture video, and we kind of distribute that to our audience, which is huge across the city. as a way of kind of really shining a light on and kind of like actually how we do what we do. So it's kind of growing and food redistribution and loads of other different things. We run the Cities Food Partnership and things like that. The reason I was asking about the top and tail was just to kind of like, I want to put this on YouTube and maybe snippets on social media. But is there a way of kind of like packaging it up that really works to sell the video? Because these are going to be kind of like quite gritty in the moment. Oh, I'm here at our nurseries and we've just harvested broccoli and it's looking great, but like if I just shove that on YouTube, it's not going to make any sense at all. I need to somehow give it a narrative and a sense of curation. So that was really what the question about the top and tail was about. But
so Jane, am I right in thinking that you want more like a title sequence than a sort of caption intro?
Yeah, that kind of thing. I mean, I'm over the age of 45, so I have no idea what I'm talking about here. I'm looking for kind of a bit of inspo really, and kind of like what really hits home. A lot of our audience are kind of under 25 and over 60, so we've got we're over 50, so we've got quite a kind of range there.
Maybe perhaps what would work for you is sort of shortish, 10-15 seconds with, almost like a montage to say all the key things that you're trying to create, a teaser in effect, that becomes your sort of, and then has a title. So each episode that you shoot, you've got this generic intro that says, you've got, I don't know, a dozen shots of the kind of things that you're going to be doing, kind of activities you're going to be undertaking.
That's a great idea. I love it.
The music, the usual sort of fast-paced intro sequence that says, we're going to be dealing with some of this kind of stuff. Today, it's that one.
I really like that. Thank you. And you don't think that gets in the way of the kind of first 20-second rule? Yeah.
And I would say, I mean, if your videos are going to be sort of 2 or 3 minutes, definitely don't make it more than 20 seconds, maybe make it more like 10 or 15 seconds.
Yeah, well, I meant, because I want them to get into the meat of it before the first 20 seconds are up. So so like a 5-second thing, and then that's really useful. Thank you.
And then maybe
people have got ideas.
Change the title for each element. Then you've got a generic opener and closer, but you've got a new title for each piece. And if you need to at the end finish the piece, you can always have a link to follow on websites or something on the screen.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. That's exactly what I was after. Thanks, Brett.
We also had Maddie share in the chat that they're going to be looking to make a crowdfunder for their tiny house project in Bristol and to document urban agriculture projects in the coming year too.
It seems like we're nearly ready to close, which is fantastic because we're 3 minutes before 2 o'clock, which is what a brilliant timing. We've just finished all the questions, I think. But right, if you haven't spoken and you want to, just unmute yourself and do it now. So we're just about to finish online.
I'm just looking, Maddie, at that Rode mic. Yes, perfect. I think that is good for the iPhone 6 because it has the little mini jack on it. And if you use that on a more modern iPhone, you've got to just get the adapter that will go into the charging port. So hopefully that answers that question.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
I'll just put that in the chat to everyone rather than just you, in case people are wondering what we're talking about. Thanks, Brett.
All right, so I'm going to email you with a recording of the session, which of course you're welcome to share with whoever you like, and with Brett's guide. For those of you that do want to submit a 1-minute video, then I'll send a little guide about what we want. Please read that before you send us a video. And I know a lot of you aren't going to do that, and that's also completely fine. And if there's anything interesting to say about the Agroecology Comms Network, which is where people interested in agroecology share advice and stories about comms, which is run by the Rural Farming Trust, I'll include that as well. And I'm not going to share your email addresses because I don't have permission to do that. So if you want to do that quickly now before we finish, then do it so that everyone who wants to can contact you. And apart from that, I just really need to say thank you to Brett, who I think did a really fantastic job, really helpful. And yeah, really great. Thanks for, and also to Amelia, who did a very nice job of tech support for us, which made it much easier. Yeah, thank you for. Anybody else got a closing comment before we finish? You can unmute yourself and say it, whatever it is.
Had a few comments in the chats, people saying thank you and that they learned a lot.
Brilliant. All right, shall we close there then?
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you for having me.
That was great.
All right, really nice to see you all. Thank you so much, Brett. That was really, really
Sorry,
good.
are you sending those docs around, did you say?
I will do, yeah. I'll email you the guide, some notes for those of you who do want to send real farm interest to 1 minute videos. So read those first because it tells you what we want to hear about and who from. And I'll send you the recording, and I'll also post that on the website. So I'll tell you where to look for it. Oh yeah, I should say on the website there's other recordings of webinars that we've done that will interest some of you, I expect, about how to make ready meals or how to work with migrants' food needs, or how to preserve your surplus food, that kind of stuff. So I'll put you a link to the website where we put all our guides as well. So that'd be good. All right, so it's 2 o'clock, so we gotta go. Thank you
you.
so much, everyone, especially Brett. That was really fantastic.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Amelia.